Next area is called selling service. And selling service can mean different things to different people, but when we were asked to put this together on how do you go about actually selling service, I think the most important thing is you have to define what does service mean. Okay, service means different things to different people. So I don't care where you are in the channel of distribution within the food service industry, service could mean different things to you. It could mean very, very different things to your end user, operator, customer that exists out there. So we're just going to spend a few minutes talking about selling service. There's I don't know if you ever had this commercial here in the UK or in Europe, but there was a famous commercial that went on for years and years and years in the United States and Canada. It was for an oil filter for a car, frame oil filter. Did anyone ever see those commercials at all? And it became very, very famous because the last line was, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And the whole gist of it was you need to have your oil changed in your car on a very, very regular basis. And when you do that, you also have to change the oil filter. Because the oil filter was the device in a car that was constantly cleaning the oil. But after a period of time, it became ineffective. Therefore, you had to replace it. And if you didn't replace it properly, then you are going to have problems with your engine and break down and so on and so forth. So it was a real dramatic commercial that was very, very successful for many years. So the same thing applies here, does it not, in the food service industry? It's called preventative maintenance. It's just a different nomenclature, but I like to use the phrase pay me now or pay me later because that's basically what it boils down to. So as an organization, well, I don't care where you are in the channel of distribution, you can establish a pay me now or pay me later attitude and a product that would do, or a service / product that you can sell to your customers out there. And there is so much evidence to support the use of a preventative maintenance program. A very worldwide design consulting firm based out of the United States. They did a huge project at Harvard University in Boston. This is a few years ago. And as part of that study, they found out a very, very substantial number that if you went on a regular preventative maintenance program, energy costs went down in their various food service facilities at Harvard by 15%. That's a huge number. So reduce your energy costs by putting in place a preventative maintenance program. It's a no-brainer, is it not? Absolutely no-brainer. Right, Steve?
Right.
You know this business better than anyone else in this room. So it's a very, very important thing to keep in mind this pay now or pay me later. You need to productize your service. And what do I mean by that? Service is quite often viewed as an intangible. And selling an intangible is a very, very difficult thing to do. So you need to turn service, I'm talking service now, fix and repair, you need to turn service into a product. And I'm not here to tell you how to do it. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. But if you can take it, moving it, I should say, from an intangible to a tangible, it's so much easier to sell when you do that versus keeping it as an intangible. For most food service operators, service is something they don't ever, fix and repair service that is something that they don't want to ever have to deal with, alrighty? It's sort of out there, it's nebulous to a certain extent until something absolutely goes wrong. A fryer breaks down, a combi oven steamer breaks down, whatever it is. So I don't care again where you are in the channel of distribution, you need to find a way to turn it into a tangible, because in doing so, you make it much, much easier for you to sell, and conversely, it makes it so much easier for your customers to comprehend as to exactly what it is. So find ways of doing that. And you can offer different levels of service. You can also package them differently. All things don't, or you can't provide one thing to all your customers. Various customers have different needs at different times. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to find ways to package these different levels of services based upon the needs or potential needs of your customer. For example, a major hotel with significant food service operations like you find in Las Vegas or downtown London or whatever, they would have a very, very different package of services or service points than a small mom and pop restaurateur that may exist right here in Birmingham or anywhere in London, or in England, I should say. So design packages that fit the needs the type of food service operation that you are trying to appeal to. Selling services, if you give them the choice, buyers of intangible services greatly prefer to buy the things they need from someone they trust. Okay? This is very important to keep in mind. So, how do you think trust is built up between a seller and a buyer in our industry, or any industry? How is trust built up? Solutions. Going back to what?
Problem solving.
Exactly. Those pains we talked about this morning, those 15 pains. And when we started talking about knowing your customer, remember that discussion? About knowing your customer. If you know your customer inside, outwards, backwards, and forwards, I can absolutely guarantee you that the trust factor will go up significantly. Alrighty. And when the trust factor goes up significantly, you significantly reduce the energy that you need to sell service to that customer base. Right? So there's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the trust factor goes only up when you perform well.
Yes. Yeah.
Over the solution, your performance.
Yes. I don't know if everyone heard him, but it's you have to perform. That's another way of building up trust between yourself and the customer that exists out there. So don't underestimate this particular component right here, this whole trust factor. It's just like yourself, already. Take a look at your own examples and what you do in life. You don't take your car to get repaired at the cheapest place in town. At least I hope you don't anyway. You'll take it to a place that you can trust, correct? Absolutely. Anyone not do that? Because a trust, or your car, operating your car is a very, very integral component of your individual tools as salespeople. So you have to have, you really want to rely on somebody based upon trust that they're going to be able to fix your car or whatever it is appropriately. And just take that story and translate that, or transport it, I should say, into the food service industry. And that's how you do it. So building up trust is absolutely critical. What service have to do and sell? What are some of the things your customers are looking for? Well, there's the fix and repair component that I've just been talking about, but that's just only one component of service. There are a lot of different components of service. Another one is installation. Already, how many of you actually, and this don't need to answer, but how many of you are actually offering an installation service to within your company or organization? Okay, several of you are. Many of you are not. That is absolutely critical, all right? Absolutely critical. You go back to those, I hate keep going back to them, but those 15 pains, one of them is that worker productivity. If something is not installed properly, then your worker productivity goes down. Efficiency goes down within your food service operation. So look at, this is another service component, making sure that the piece of equipment is installed properly. Now that doesn't mean that you, as a dealer or distributor or a manufacturer, actually has to perform the installation. It may, but what it also means is that you contract with or work with an organization, and maybe a service fixing and repair organization, or maybe a company that is just specialized in installation. Work with them on a contractual basis or general agreement basis that they will do all your installation, and making sure that they do it properly. Because, as you well know, based upon everyone's experience in here, a piece of equipment that is not installed properly can result in a tremendous amount of headaches, not only for you as the seller, but also for the buyer. Already. And when that happens, what happens to the trust factor? What happens to the trust factor if something isn't installed properly?
You lost it.
Where the hell am I here? Sorry. Yeah, they lose trust in you, correct? Didn't realize this thing was so sensitive. You just touch it and it moves.
No trust.
Pardon me? I didn't trust it. Yes, there you go. I wasn't properly trained on it. So the trust factor goes down. And when the trust factor goes down, you don't have the same relationship. And I mean, it's just a very, very systemic approach to things. It's very, very holistic. You just can't look at each one of these components individually. You have to look at it together. So installation is important. Also, design is important. That's a service that you can provide. How many dealers, and again, I don't need an answer, but how many dealers provide, food service equipment dealerships offer design services? Right. Several of you do. Right. It's not just an independent design consultant that you deal with. And again, you don't have to do it yourself. you could partner with design consulting firms out there and say, hey, look at Mr. Customer, we don't do the actual design work, but we have partnered with a company ABC who've got an excellent reputation, yada, 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 work together, alrighty? Again, you got to think systemically when you're dealing with this. Some other things, delivery. That's another service that you could provide out there. It's in service, or pardon me, delivery is obviously very, very critical. There's a whole seminar that we can develop or have developed on what are the important components with respect to delivery and installation as a service component. And doing it properly is very important. It ties it in with the removal and disposal of the old equipment as well. That's another service that you can provide to your customers that exist out there. Proper removal and proper disposal is becoming more and more critical, especially when it comes to refrigeration units. How do you dispose of the various chemicals and components within a refrigerator that so it won't, if you don't dispose of them properly, pardon me, you'll create some sort of environmental issue or environmental problem. How many dealers and distributors and manufacturers think of that and providing that as a service? Anybody? Few of you do, not all of you, all right, but few of you do. It's very, very important that you look at it that way. Preventative maintenance programs, which I talked about at the outset of this particular chapter in today's discussion. That's very, very important that you do things to prevent maintenance or put in place preventative maintenance programs for a lot of different reasons. Other things, competitive evaluations. How many of you have ever done a competitive evaluation for your customers? How would you even go about doing it? Okay. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can define competitive evaluation. It could be a competitive evaluation of another equipment manufacturer, or it could be an evaluation of restaurant A versus restaurant B versus restaurant C. Alrighty. And you say, well, that's not my bailiwick. That's not my, that's not the area that I'm good at. Again, you don't have to do it yourself, but if you could partner with somebody and said, hey, a market researcher, for example, that knows the industry, knows how to get that vital and important information, how valuable is that to an end user operator? It's incredibly valuable, is it not? Just knowing the trends that are going on in the industry. And remember I asked that question earlier this morning, I said, how many of you really know what's going on in the industry and what the trends are? 2 people raised their hands already. 2 people out of a room of approximately 80 here. Not very good statistic as far as I'm concerned. All right, so that's another thing that you can sell with respect to service. Again, it's redefining it. Test kitchen facilities. I know, not here in this country, but several other countries around the world where I've been and done some studies in the industry, where test kitchens are an absolutely incredibly important service that the dealer, distributor, or manufacturer's reps in certain countries around the world are using. A very good friend of mine I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine in Southern California. He's a manufacturer's rep. He never takes title to the goods at all, his company, and he literally covers the entire state of California as a manufacturer's rep. So he doesn't take title, doesn't take inventory or any of those kinds of things. But he has a test kitchen that is just a marvel to see. In fact, he's got 2 test kitchens. They're mirror images of each other. He leases out his test kitchen to end user operators. He himself, he's got a huge staff of about 30 people, but he himself is an accomplished chef. He's got his chef papers from Toronto, that's where he was from originally, and is an incredibly accomplished chef. So he works with the chains and end user operators in his territory, which is all of California and a little bit of Nevada. And he brings these people in. They rent his facilities. He works with them, I should say, developing recipes or choosing the right piece of equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So he's turned his test kitchens into profit centers. So when these people come into, these end user operators come into his facility and try out this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment, guess what percentage of the time they buy those particular pieces of equipment? Take a wild ass guess. Pardon me? 70%?
Most of the time.
That's not a percentage. That's 51% or higher. That's a candy ass response, sorry. Yeah.
I'd say
90?
90%.
80%?
95.
95%. Okay, 95% of the time, those end user operators will buy the particular pieces of equipment or pieces of equipment that they used in his test kitchen. Alrighty. That's a huge percentage, is it not? Wouldn't you like to sell 95% of the time to customers that came into you? So that's a service that's being provided. Yeah?
Is that being effective because it might be more of a gimmick?
In whose eyes?
Buyers' eyes.
No, not at all.
I'm like, your friend is obviously doing it.
He's not the only
from a
one.
good place, and
He's
then-
not the only one.
Yeah, but he's doing it from a good place, and he's testing his own equipment, and then customers can see it, and then they're seeing a sort of a show, so it must be good.
No, he's not showing it off.
No, yeah.
Okay. He is allowing them to use the equipment. They can rent his kitchen for a day, for an hour, for a week, a month already, and they will come in and use it. He doesn't put any pressure on them to buy the equipment at all already. It's a very, very subtle selling approach, but it works incredibly well.
Is that like whole kitchen equipment?
A whole kitchen. Everything. Absolutely everything, from ranges to combi ovens to fryers to slicers and dicers to mixers to knives, you name it. He has absolutely everything. And it's unbelievable. And he's not the only one. Now, some dealers, dealer distributors are doing that as well and finding it unbelievably successful. How many of you have test kitchens? Just a few of you, okay? How many of you on a regular basis invite your customers in to do what I just described? 2 or 3 of you already. A few more, put your hands up. So that is a service that you can provide. Providing a test kitchen facilities goes in somewhat, the next bullet point up here, equipment evaluation. It's evaluating one piece of equipment versus another piece of equipment is very, very important. It's a service that a dealer distributor can provide. You know, if you understand and really, really know your customer out there and that you've built up a trust with them, then they will trust you that you come up with the right results. But you have to ask the right questions before you do this. For example, if an end user operator is looking to buy a combi oven steamer, and just use that as an example. There's this combi oven steamer, there's this combi oven steamer, and there's this combi oven steamer. Alrighty. All three do basically exactly the same thing, but this one is X price, this one's X price, this one has got certain features, this one's got certain features at a certain price, and this has got other features for a certain price. Now, you know, from a very, very selfish perspective, this one over here is the most expensive one. It's got the most features on it, and that's the one you'd like to sell because you're going to make more money on it, presumably, more profit, commission, wherever you are in the channel, that type of thing. The first one that I mentioned over here is the least expensive, doesn't have as many features, and so on and so forth. So, if you want to do an honest evaluation, you really, really need to know what that combi oven is going to be used for. Alrighty? Does it need all of these bells and whistles and a PhD in physics to understand how it operates? Or can we get away with simple bells and whistles and dials and so on and so forth over here? So do an honest evaluation. How many of you in this room were at the CISA annual conference last November? November, was it? Okay, last November. I know some of you were. All right, do you remember I moderated a panel at the front? Not at the back, but at the front. And one of the people on the panel was a design consultant, and I forget who it was.
Gareth.
Pardon me?
Gareth.
There you go. Anyway, he said, totally not prompted whatsoever, he said, correct me if I don't get the right nomenclature in place, that a lot of his specifications now, he is specifying the least complicated piece of equipment. The piece of equipment that's the easiest to use, the easiest to understand, and in some cases the least expensive, but he's found that he needs to do that because of the level or the competency of the people working in the kitchen. So he wants it, if I interpret it right, he wants something very, very simple that people can understand and easy to use, et cetera, versus the PhD in physics to operate this particular combi oven steamer that exists over here. Know your customer and you've built up a high level of trust. This is another service that you can provide your customer, and that is you do a very, very honest evaluation between product A or Unit A, Unit B, and Unit C within the combi oven series. Make sense? Yeah. How many of you do that now? That's what I thought. 2 or 3, and that's it. It's a great thing to offer. Workflow analysis. How many of you do that for your clients? Okay. This rep I was telling you about in California is a good friend of mine, plus several other reps that I know, plus several other dealers, distributors in the United States. Again, I haven't visited many dealer distributorships in this country, several, but not as many as I'd want. One of the things they offer is workflow optimization studies. Okay. They'll go into a restaurant or an end user operator and see what's going on. They take videos of what's going on, and then they bring all this together at the test kitchen, because that's where it's all done, and they allow, or they help the end user operator walk through the current workflow, and then how do you find ways to optimize that? How do you find ways to change it so that it's becoming it's much more effective and much more efficient, which means greater profitability for the end user operator. And it's amazing when you do that. I've seen some of the results from a couple of dealerships in the United States, plus this rep firm that I just mentioned to you. The significant reduction in the number of employees that are employed by a restaurant just by going through, I'm going to call it simple, but basically a simple workflow analysis. How do you optimize the workflow within a food service facility? You say, but I don't do that. Well, remember, back to slide number 6 when I talked about the 15 pains, workflow optimization or employee productivity optimization was one of those pains. And there is not a food service operator in the world that can't use that type of a service to maximize the output in a minimal amount of space, or just literally changing how things flow within a food service operation. So that is an opportunity. That's a service that you can provide. As I mentioned before earlier this morning, technology changes, the equipment changes, and it could totally change your workflow within a food service operation. How things were done 5 years ago versus 10 years ago versus today is very, very different, right? Just because of technology. Very, very simply because of technology. I'll give you an example of that. It happened to me personally about a couple months ago. I was in Omaha, Nebraska. And you say, what the hell has Omaha, Nebraska got to do with it? But I went to this brand new restaurant. It's only been open 2 or 3 months. And this ties in with technology. This story ties in with technology, and it ties in with workflow analysis and optimization. All right. So I went, and again, provided as a service. So I went to this particular restaurant. It was a Mexican restaurant, and an upscale type of Mexican restaurant. And my wife and I and another couple went in there, and we sat down, and the waiter, she came over to us, and the waiter had an iPad already, and he said, may I take your drink orders, please? So we each ordered a margarita or whatever the hell it is that we wanted to drink. He typed it, or he punched a couple things in his iPad, and then he said, if you decided what you would like to eat. And we said, yeah. You know, we looked at the menu. We would like, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that type of thing. And before he finished taking our food order, our drink orders had already arrived. Okay. They had a mixologist standing at the bar that received the order right from his iPod instantly. So I gave him my drink order. It was a, whatever it is, margarita A. It instantly went to the mixologist at the bar. He started making that, and then when my wife gave him her drink order, it went, and so on and so forth. So the mixologist didn't have to wait to all 4 orders to show up. They just came instantaneous to his to the mixologist's cash register or point of sale or whatever, that type of thing. So what's that got to do with workflow analysis? When that restaurant, because I talked to the owner. I got to talk to the owner and told him of my work within the food service industry. And I said, how did that affect your overall design when you put this restaurant together? And he said, well, I didn't need this, but I needed this, and I needed that. And I changed what this person did, and I changed what that person did, and so on and so forth. Because he had another restaurant prior to opening this particular one. So when I sat back and looked at it and analyzed it and listened to what he had to say, based upon the use of technology, and based upon needing to change the workflow within a food service facility, someone provided him a service. Okay? someone provided him a particular service that significantly increased the flow, not only within the kitchen, but how flow went to us, the consumers, within that particular restaurant. So it was really, really interesting, and we're starting to see more and more of that all the time. So these are all the things that you can do from a service perspective. It's not just fix and repair, but it's all of these things that I got listed: repair, fix and repair, installation, designing, delivery, removal and disposal of old equipment, preventative maintenance programs we've talked about, competitive evaluations, test kitchen facilities, equipment evaluation, workflow analysis. That's just a small inventory of things that service means to the end user operator out there in this industry. And let's face it, the only one that counts is the end user operator, right? None of us would be in this room today if it weren't for the end user operator. So you've got to get into their heads and what does service mean for them from an operational perspective, and then find ways to either do it ourselves or, as I've mentioned several times, partner with another organization that can provide these services. Because it's not, to go back to one of my opening slides earlier this morning, it's not about features and benefits. It's about solving problems. And service is just one of those problems. And again, it all depends how you define service. Okay. Any questions about that?